Let's begin. But first, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Broken Truth. Levi Carter's name carried weight in every room he entered. A wealthy businessman, admired by colleagues and envied by competitors, he was the epitome of success. Publicly, he and Sophia Carter were the perfect couple, smiling in photographs, attending galas, and hosting lavish dinners in their penthouse that overlooked the city skyline. The world saw happiness, elegance, and a growing family, and no one suspected the undercurrents of tension beneath the glossy exterior. Sophia's pregnancy should have been a celebrated chapter in their lives, yet behind closed doors, warmth was in short supply. Levi's attention drifted easily, absorbed by work, meetings, and, as whispers suggested, another woman. Conversations that once felt intimate had grown terse, coated with impatience and indifference. Small gestures of neglect, a missed appointment, an unanswered call, a passing comment that cut deeper than intended, built up over months, chipping away at the trust and comfort Sophia once took for granted. Isolation became her constant companion. Friends noticed her absence at social events, messages went unanswered, and she stopped reaching out as repeated rejection and coldness eroded her confidence. She wandered through rooms filled with luxury yet felt invisible, trapped in a gilded cage. Nights were the hardest. She would lie awake listening to Levi's voice in the distance, sharp and commanding, wondering if the life growing inside her would ever feel safe. Then one evening, after another argument, Sophia disappeared. No note, no call, no trace left behind, just an emptiness that shocked everyone who knew them. Levi found himself frantically searching for answers, his public image cracking with anxiety, while the world around him whispered questions he could not answer. The perfect life he had projected was suddenly exposed as fragile and hollow, leaving both him and those closest to the couple questioning what had really happened. Her disappearance was more than mysterious, it was a declaration, silent but profound, that she would no longer endure the cold indifference of a man she once trusted completely. Camila Rhodes arrived in Levi Carter's life with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she wanted and how to take it. She was striking, tall, impeccably dressed, with a sharp gaze that seemed to measure every weakness she encountered. Bold, unafraid, and endlessly persuasive, she understood the subtle art of influence. From the moment she entered Levi's professional circle, she had him captivated, not with romance, but with validation, admiration, and the promise of excitement he hadn't felt in years. Every compliment was calculated, every laugh a hook, and every shared secret a tiny thread binding him closer to her world. Levi, flattered and intoxicated by attention, found himself drawn to Camila in ways he hadn't realized he could be. She stroked his ego, praised his achievements, and made him feel important in ways Sophia's quiet presence no longer could. Her words whispered of power, freedom, and indulgence, subtly contrasting with the burdens of family life. His long hours and preoccupation with work now had a justification. He felt he deserved this thrill, this escape, this validation from someone who seemed to see him as extraordinary. Sophia felt the shift immediately, though at first she tried to convince herself it was imagined. But Camila's presence was magnetic, impossible to ignore. Every message Levi brushed off, every invitation he declined, every lingering look was a subtle blade against her heart. The pregnancy she had hoped would secure love and attention now felt like an obstacle in her husband's eyes, a burden that weighed on his patience and generosity. The home that had once offered warmth was now a cold battlefield of silent judgments and unspoken resentments. Arguments became more frequent, often erupting over trivialities, yet beneath the surface lay something far more dangerous. Psychological pressure, veiled threats, and whispers of betrayal crept into their daily lives. Levi's defensiveness and impatience intensified, and Sophia began to sense the true danger Camila represented, not just as a rival for attention, but as a catalyst pushing her toward emotional collapse. Fear mingled with anger, grief with despair, as Sophia realized that her husband's choices were creating a chasm she might never cross, and the life growing inside her suddenly made her even more vulnerable to the storm brewing around her. Days stretched into a blur for Sophia Carter, each one heavier than the last, marked by silence where once there had been warmth. Her phone buzzed constantly with unanswered calls and messages, not from strangers, but from friends and family who slowly began to drift away, unsure how to navigate the tension that clung to her marriage like a shadow. Invitations went unanswered, visits unreturned, and the world outside her apartment seemed to retreat along with her, leaving her with nothing but the echo of empty rooms and the faint hum of city life beyond the walls. Inside, Levi's behavior grew more blatant, more hurtful. Camila's presence was no longer discreet. He invited her to lunches he had once reserved for Sophia, whispered compliments in her presence, and flaunted their camaraderie with an arrogance that burned Sophia's chest each time she watched from the sidelines. Every smile Levi gave Camila, every secretive glance, every shared joke felt like a public reminder that she had been replaced in his affection and attention. The pregnancy that had once been a source of pride now felt like a target on her back, a reason she had become less important, less thrilling, less visible to the man she loved. Fear seeped into every corner of her life. She walked through her apartment with a cautious vigilance, never knowing what Levi might do next, never knowing how long he would ignore her presence before returning with some new display of indifference or cruelty. Hopelessness settled like frost on her mind, anxiety twisted through her body in constant knots. Even the simplest acts, like preparing a meal or trying to sleep, were shadowed by tension and unease. Nights were the hardest, spent staring at the ceiling as she counted the hours until she could face another day of subtle torment, the unborn child moving gently inside her belly, a small reminder of hope and responsibility. Despite the crushing weight, Sophia's mind began to plan. Quietly, carefully, she considered ways to protect herself and her child from a man who had chosen someone else, who had made it clear where his priorities lay. She imagined leaving quietly, gathering what she could, and finding safety somewhere that Levi's influence could not touch. Each thought was tinged with fear, yet strengthened by determination. As she pressed a hand to her belly, Sophia whispered to the life within, a promise of protection and love. Her heartbreak was immense, but beneath it stirred courage, a fragile but undeniable flame. She was alone, yes, but not powerless. And in the quiet moments of isolation, she began to realize that the only person who could truly save them both was herself. The tension that had been simmering for months finally erupted one evening, the air between Levi and Sophia so thick it felt almost tangible. A casual dinner had devolved into a clash of words, their polite facades stripped away to reveal raw emotion. Levi's patience had long since worn thin, and his frustration spilled out in harsh tones, accusations sharp and unforgiving. Sophia tried to respond calmly, to reason, to remind him of their shared life and the child she carried, but her words were swallowed by the storm of his ego. Levi's declaration came suddenly, cutting through the room like a knife. He said it plainly, without hesitation or regret, he had chosen Camila over her. Every carefully constructed illusion of love shattered in that single sentence. He praised Camila, highlighted her charm, and made it clear that Sophia's presence, her pregnancy, and her efforts meant nothing compared to the thrill of his affair. The betrayal was total, deliberate, and undeniable. Sophia felt a strange clarity amid the whirlwind of pain. Tears pricked her eyes, but she did not cry aloud. Instead, she stood, her movements deliberate and steady. Silent defiance replaced fear. She gathered a few belongings, refusing to argue, refusing to plead for what would never return. Without another word, she walked out of the penthouse, leaving Levi stunned and furious, the echo of the closing door resonating far louder than any scream could. Panic spread quickly. Staff whispered, friends called frantically, and family members arrived in confusion and alarm, only to find no trace of her. Levi's calls went unanswered, messages ignored, and the luxurious home that had once seemed so controlled now felt hollow and powerless. Each person who tried to reach her felt the weight of her absence, a void that carried both worry and fear. The city seemed to hold its breath as the mystery deepened. No one knew where Sophia had gone, what steps she had taken, or how long she would remain hidden. The stage was set for suspense, every unanswered question fueling speculation and tension. One thing was certain, the woman who had been pushed to the edge had disappeared on her own terms, leaving behind a world unprepared for the consequences of her silent rebellion. Her vanishing was not just an escape, it was the opening move in a story that promised confrontation, revelation, and the slow but inevitable reckoning of betrayal. Sophia stepped out into the city streets with nothing but a small bag and the heavy weight of uncertainty pressing against her chest. Each step was measured, cautious, as if the world itself had become a series of invisible traps waiting to ensnare her. The luxury and comfort she had once taken for granted were gone, replaced by a cold reality that demanded resourcefulness, patience, and relentless vigilance. She had to navigate the financial maze of her sudden independence, quickly realizing that without access to Levi's accounts or influence, even basic necessities required careful planning and discreet strategies. Finding shelter became her first priority. She moved from one anonymous apartment to another, always keeping her location hidden, changing routines, and avoiding familiar places that could tie her back to Levi. Grocery shopping, transportation, and even simple walks became exercises in caution, each encounter with strangers carrying a potential threat. Her pregnancy added a layer of urgency, every pang of hunger or fatigue was magnified, and every crowded space brought worry that someone might recognize her, or worse, track her movements. Yet amidst this struggle, subtle acts of kindness appeared like fragile lifelines. A barista who offered an extra meal without asking, a taxi driver who refused payment, a neighbor who discreetly handed over a small package when Sophia's hands were full. These quiet gestures reminded her that humanity could still exist in a world that felt overwhelmingly hostile. Though she could not yet afford to trust anyone fully, she kept these moments in her heart, drawing strength and hope from them. Her inner monologues became her anchor, reinforcing her resolve. She whispered to herself, to the life growing inside her, promises of safety, love, and resilience. She imagined the future, a small bubble of security and freedom that she would create for her child no matter the cost. Each challenge, every scolding landlord, every skipped meal, every long night spent alone, tested her endurance, but also sharpened her instincts, building a resolve as strong and steady as the life she carried within. Danger was never far. One evening, a man's suspicious gaze lingered too long, forcing Sophia to duck into a dimly lit alley, heart racing and breath shallow. Another time, a sudden rainstorm threatened to soak her meager supplies, sending her scrambling for cover in a narrow doorway. Each moment of near exposure was a reminder that survival was fragile, that any mistake could cost more than comfort, it could cost her child. And yet, through it all, Sophia pressed on, her courage and determination becoming her shields, proving that even in exile, a mother's will could be stronger than fear, stronger than the world that sought to overwhelm her. Camila Rhodes moved through Levi Carter's world with a confidence that seemed untouchable, her every step calculated to remind him, and everyone else, that she had won. She smiled with a sharpness that cut through the air, laughed with an ease that hinted at secrets Levi could not fully control, and lingered wherever his attention might falter. To the outside world, she appeared as a glamorous companion, but beneath that polished exterior lay a woman who thrived on power, manipulation, and the quiet thrill of seeing Levi bend to her will. Her presence alone was a statement. Sophia was gone, and Camila now occupied her place. Levi, intoxicated by the sense of conquest, allowed arrogance to dominate his behavior. He began openly flaunting Camila in social circles, ignoring whispers of gossip that had once been harmless. Friends and acquaintances exchanged wary glances, sensing the imbalance, yet Levi dismissed their concern with charm and authority. He felt invincible, untouchable, shielded by his wealth, status, and Camila's unyielding devotion. Each public appearance reinforced his perception of control, and he reveled in the thrill of attention, failing to notice the subtle warning signs around him. But overconfidence often comes with cracks in the armor. Invitations he neglected, gestures he took for granted, and careless comments to colleagues began to draw scrutiny. People noticed patterns: the absence of Sophia, the unrelenting presence of Camila, and whispers of betrayal started circulating beyond the controlled boundaries Levi believed he had established. Gossip became murmurs, murmurs became speculation, and speculation was starting to threaten the image he had worked so hard to maintain. Even Camila's behavior, once flawless in its subtlety, occasionally revealed cracks: a lingering glance at someone who noticed, a smile too knowing, a comment too pointed. The narrative that Levi thought he controlled was shifting, and yet, he remained blind to the consequences waiting just beyond the surface. The tension built slowly, like the hush before a storm, foreshadowing that the carefully constructed illusion of power, desire, and triumph could unravel at any moment. Somewhere, just beyond Levi's awareness, Sophia's story was not finished. Her absence was not surrender, it was preparation. The threads of her eventual return were weaving quietly, the groundwork laid in shadow, waiting for the moment when Levi's arrogance and Camilla's audacity would collide with the force of a truth neither of them could ignore. Sophia's disappearance sent ripples through Levi Carter's carefully curated world, though at first, he refused to acknowledge them. To the outside, he maintained an air of control, attending meetings, hosting events, and parading Camila at every social gathering. But behind closed doors, unease gnawed at him. Calls from friends and family, once easily ignored, began to carry undertones of concern, their voices tinged with suspicion. Questions he could no longer brush off reached him more frequently, each one a reminder that Sophia's absence could no longer be contained as a private matter. Investigations began quietly at first. Family members who had grown uneasy started reaching out to neighbors, former colleagues, and close friends. Social media activity was monitored, private messages were scanned for clues. Authorities were tipped subtly, as if the world itself sensed something was amiss. Each inquiry was discreet, but persistent, leaving Levi with the first pangs of fear and guilt he had yet to feel. The smugness that had once carried him now felt fragile, as though the veneer of invincibility could shatter at any moment. Meanwhile, subtle hints of Sophia's presence began surfacing, almost like whispers from the past. A note tucked under a neighbor's door, a fleeting glimpse of a figure through the window of a distant cafe, messages sent but never delivered, all small signs that someone was watching, planning, and moving carefully in the shadows. Each clue, though cryptic, reinforced that she had not vanished entirely, that her disappearance was deliberate and strategic. The tension escalated with every unanswered question. Friends speculated, staff worried, and the social circle that once revolved comfortably around Levi began to feel the weight of unease. His confidence faltered, replaced by a gnawing anxiety he could not control. Every call that went unanswered, every shadow that seemed too long, and every rumor that floated to his ears tightened the noose of uncertainty around him. The audience, witnessing Levi's gradual unraveling, understood what he could not: Sophia's absence was not surrender. Her silence and cunning created a suspenseful vacuum, a waiting game where discovery, confrontation, and revelation loomed just beyond the horizon. Each subtle sign, each mysterious clue, built toward a reckoning that was inevitable, and the anticipation of her return, or the revelation of what she had been doing, kept the tension sharp, electric, and utterly unrelenting. Amid the shadows of her precarious life, Sophia began to encounter a quiet, unexpected ally. A woman named Maya Thompson, a former friend of her family who had always admired Sophia's courage, noticed subtle signs that something was amiss. She had been keeping track of Levi's public displays, Camilla's increasingly brazen appearances, and the unsettling disappearance of Sophia. Though no one knew exactly where Sophia had gone, Maya's instincts told her that the young woman was alive, determined, and moving carefully to protect herself and her unborn child. Maya began providing indirect support, leaving small, untraceable resources that could help Sophia survive. Packages of necessities appeared at anonymous locations, cash was discreetly delivered, and information about safe places to rest or temporarily hide was sent through coded messages. Each act was subtle, invisible to the world, yet invaluable to Sophia, who found strength in knowing someone was watching out for her from a distance. The aid was enough to steady her nerves, help her plan her next steps, and regain control of a life that had been spiraling out of reach. With this quiet support, Sophia's resilience became more apparent. She moved with purpose, making calculated decisions, rationing her resources carefully, and thinking several steps ahead. Nights of fear and fatigue no longer left her paralyzed, instead, they sharpened her focus. Every risk she took was measured against the safety of her unborn child, and every challenge she overcame reinforced the determination that had been simmering since the moment Levi had chosen another woman over her. Meanwhile, Camilla's arrogance escalated. She grew careless in her flaunting of triumph, confident that Levi's wealth and influence shielded them both. Parties, social outings, and public displays of affection became louder, more provocative, as if she were daring the world to challenge her claim. But beneath her smug exterior, subtle cracks were forming, rumors of Sophia's survival, the occasional witness to unexplained movements, and whispers of support for the missing woman began circulating quietly. The tension between careful planning and blatant overconfidence foreshadowed the inevitable. Sophia was slowly gaining control of her narrative, while Camila and Levi remained blind to the rising consequences of their choices. Each act of resilience, each quiet step toward freedom, brought Sophia closer to the moment when her absence would no longer be ignored, and when the reckoning for betrayal, arrogance, and cruelty would finally arrive. The day Sophia decided to return, or more accurately, to reveal herself, was nothing short of explosive. She did not come with fury or haste. Instead, she orchestrated a careful, controlled entrance that left Levi and Camila unprepared. In a high-profile gala, meant to celebrate Levi's latest business venture and flaunt his supposed triumph with Camila, Sophia appeared. Her presence was immediate and undeniable, elegant, composed, and radiant, with a quiet authority that silenced the chatter in the room. Whispers spread like wildfire as guests recognized her. The woman they had assumed vanished without a trace. Cameras clicked, phones captured the moment, and Levi's smug expression faltered as the reality of her survival and deliberate return sank in. The impact was both public and deeply personal. Social media erupted almost instantly, contrasting the opulence of Levi and Camila with the story of Sophia's disappearance and endurance. Legal implications began to surface as whispers of neglect, emotional abuse, and potential endangerment circulated. Friends, colleagues, and family who had stayed on the sidelines now offered support, rallying behind Sophia. Levi's carefully curated image of power and control cracked under the pressure, each word he had spoken in arrogance now echoing as evidence of betrayal and moral failure. Camilla's schemes began to unravel before everyone's eyes. Her confidence, once unshakable, wavered as she realized that the woman she had tried to erase was back with purpose. Conversations that once went unchallenged were now scrutinized, and her manipulations could no longer operate in the shadows. Social backlash hit hard, invitations rescinded, alliances questioned, and her reputation tarnished by association with cruelty and deceit. Levi, confronted with the consequences of his choices, experienced a slow, painful reckoning. The thrill of conquest and ego-driven decisions crumbled, leaving fear, guilt, and remorse in their place. The arrogance that had once insulated him from accountability now felt like a cage, and the life he had attempted to control slipped through his fingers. Sophia, meanwhile, stood unwavering, her child safely by her side. Every glance, every subtle gesture, every controlled word carried a weight of justice and moral clarity. This was her moment of triumph, not just over betrayal, but over fear and helplessness. The emotional peak surged as she faced those who had wronged her, her presence alone delivering a form of revenge stronger than any act of violence, vindication, dignity, and undeniable proof that resilience and courage could overcome manipulation, deceit, and arrogance. In that room, the balance of power shifted irrevocably, and the reckoning was complete. Sophia stepped into the light of a new chapter with a calm determination that came from surviving the storm of betrayal and fear. The city that had once felt hostile now seemed full of possibilities, as if every street, every quiet park, and every small cafe offered a chance to reclaim the life that had been taken from her. She found a modest apartment, secure and peaceful, where she could raise her child without fear or intrusion. Each decoration, each carefully chosen item, reflected her independence and the deliberate creation of a home that was safe, nurturing, and filled with warmth. Her days became structured around her child's well-being, every choice guided by love, responsibility, and foresight. Sophia learned to trust her instincts, to navigate challenges with clarity and confidence, and to seek support only from those who had proven themselves trustworthy. Friends who had remained loyal or grown close during her absence became pillars of her new life, providing a network of care and encouragement. Each small victory, from a quiet morning spent reading to her child's first laugh, was a reminder that safety, happiness, and stability were not privileges reserved for others, but rights she had earned through courage and perseverance. Independence became her mantra, and with it came a deep sense of self-respect and resilience. She no longer defined herself through the approval or attention of Levi or anyone else, she defined herself through action, strength, and love for her child. Lessons learned in isolation and hardship now guided her every step, shaping a future that she controlled completely. Meanwhile, Levi faced the consequences of his choices. Public scrutiny, legal entanglements, and social disgrace replaced the power and influence he had once wielded effortlessly. Regret settled over him like a heavy cloak, a constant reminder of the arrogance and cruelty that had led him to lose what mattered most. For Sophia, however, the story closed not with vengeance, but with hope. Holding her child close, she felt a quiet satisfaction and peace, knowing she had survived, grown stronger, and built a life defined by courage and love. The darkness of betrayal had passed, and in its place stood a woman empowered, resilient, and ready to embrace the future she had fought so fiercely to create. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Broken Truth.